Welcome to the Explainer. Have you ever read a really complex text and just felt like you were kind of skimming the surface? Like there was this whole deeper meaning hanging out just out of your reach? Well, reading a text isn't just about passively absorbing words on a page. It's actually a lot like an investigation. Today, we're going to uncover the hidden structural beams that hold texts together. And we're going to be using a brilliant methodology called inductive Bible study, which was developed by Dr. David Bauer. Whether you're digging into ancient manuscripts, classic literature, or even modern persuasive essays, the tools we're about to explore are literally going to change how you read forever. So let's grab our magnifying glasses and jump right in.
So here's our roadmap for today. We're going to be looking at 6 key areas. 1, the hidden textual architecture. 2, cause, effect, and proof. 3, defining purpose and means. 4, preparation and fulfillment. 5, the power of summaries. And finally, 6, questions, problems, and solutions. All right, let's get started.
Section 1. The hidden textual architecture.
When we read, it is so incredibly easy to just get distracted by the surface. Think about reading like looking up at this massive, towering skyscraper. The words on the page, they're really just the paint. We often only see that outer surface layer, and we completely miss the foundational relationships, the steel beams that are actually holding all the ideas together. To truly understand a text, we have to become textual detectives. We have to look past the vocabulary to spot the primary relationships that give a text its shape and its ultimate meaning.
Moving on to Section 2. Cause, effect, and proof.
Let's look at exactly how texts build their cases through 2 primary relationships. On the one hand, we've got causation. Now, this is a forward movement, kind of like falling dominoes. An idea produces a subsequent event. Cause moves to effect. But then we have substantiation, and this is the exact reverse sequence. It's a movement backward, starting from an effect, and then tracing the footprints all the way back to provide the root cause. The trick here is knowing exactly how to spot these movements. When you read, you've got to keep an eye out for explicit trigger words. For causation, the ultimate trigger is therefore. Because this is true, therefore you must do this. For substantiation, it's because or for. Now, these might seem like tiny little conjunctions, but they are massive clues. Let me show you just how radically one of these little words can shift our entire understanding of a story. Take the famous story of Jonah. He's told to go preach to Nineveh, but he immediately jumps on a boat going the exact opposite direction to Tarshish. Why? I mean, you'd probably assume he was terrified they would kill him, right? But listen to the substantiation statement in Jonah 4:2. That is why I made haste to flee to Tarshish, for I knew that thou art a gracious God and merciful. If you miss that one little trigger word for, you miss the entire punchline. Jonah wasn't scared at all. He knew God would forgive his enemies, and he was honestly just acting petty. Tracing the effect back to the cause completely flips our understanding of his entire character.
All right, Section 3. Defining purpose and means.
You see, authors don't just explain why things happen. They actively guide us by connecting the means to an end. In textual analysis, this is known as instrumentation. And it's an absolutely crucial tool because it reveals the explicit purpose behind a specific action, or sometimes the purpose behind an entire book. Instrumentation generally comes in 2 distinct forms: explicit statements of purpose and descriptions of means. Here's how you spot it out in the wild. For statement of purpose, look for the phrase, in order that. For instance, if you spot the phrase, in order that, right at the beginning of Proverbs chapter 1, it is a total aha moment. The author is literally handing you the key to the entire book's intention. Once you see that, you realize every single proverb that follows is designed to fulfill that explicitly stated purpose of gaining wisdom. On the flip side, we have the description of means, using words like by means of or through. A great example of this is the book of Joshua, where Joshua functions structurally as the physical agent, the means, through which the people are planted in the land. Keeping that structural role in mind keeps your interpretation perfectly aligned with the author's intent.
Section 4. Preparation and fulfillment.
We all tend to just kind of skip over those boring greetings in ancient letters, right? Well, actually, scratch that. It's a huge mistake. The technical term here is preparation and realization. It's when a text provides vital background information that fundamentally changes how the rest of the book is understood. Take the Apostle Paul's letter to the Galatians. Right in his greeting, Paul introduces himself as an apostle not from man, but through Jesus Christ. Why be so specific right out of the gate? Because structurally, he's actively preparing the reader. He is laying the foundational bricks for his upcoming intense defense of his specific gospel message. A highly recognizable form of this relationship is prediction and fulfillment. And get this, in the biblical books of Kings, this architectural structure happens an incredible 25 times. A prediction is made, preparing the reader, and then later it is realized, always fulfilled with the exact phrase, according to the word of the Lord. It creates this rock-solid, dependable rhythm for the reader.
Moving to Section 5, the power of summaries. So we've talked about moving forward and backward logically, but what about when an author pauses to wrap everything up into a neat little package? Sometimes the summary doesn't come at the end. It comes at the very beginning. We call this pre-capitulation. It's a point-by-point summary placed right at the front of the material, acting like a map or highly selective guide for what you're about to read. A perfect example of this is Judges chapter 2. Before the book even dives into the messy, chaotic stories of the individual judges, it offers a pre-capitulation that perfectly maps out the upcoming tragic cycle. You know, the people sin, God allows them to be oppressed, they cry out, God raises a judge to save them, the judge dies, and then the people sin again. But the true power of a summary isn't just in the overview, it lies in its selectivity. Because hidden right there in that judge's summary is a crucial phrase. The Lord was moved to pity. The summary reveals this vital emotional detail about God's motivation. So why does the author intentionally highlight this here? Because this explicit motivation of divine pity is actually missing from a lot of the specific, gritty narratives of the judges that follow. If we hadn't paid close attention to the structural summary at the beginning, we would completely miss the emotional heartbeat of the entire era. And that brings us to our final tool, Section 6, Questions, Problems, and Solutions. We call this interrogation. Interrogation involves a question or a problem followed directly by its answer or solution. And this creates a really fascinating rhetorical rhythm. Take a look at the book of Malachi. The entire book is architecturally built on this back-and-forth dialogue. The people ask these defensive questions like, how have we despised thy name? And the Lord immediately fires back by offering polluted food. This interrogative structure relentlessly exposes the gap between the people's perception and reality.
But I really want you to consider this for a second. What happens when interrogation isn't just about spoken dialogue? What happens when it frames an entire narrative arc? Interrogation can actually serve as the structural foundation of a whole story, moving us systematically from a devastating problem to a complete solution. Take the book of Ruth, for example. The text sets up a twofold problem right there in chapter 1. The severe problem of famine and the tragic problem of death and a lack of family for Naomi. The narrative tension of the entire book hangs on this structural problem. As we read, we track this problem directly to the twofold solution at the end of the book, the physical harvest solving the famine, and Ruth's marriage and the birth of Obed solving the problem of death and loneliness. By tracing this problem-to-solution architecture, the ultimate message of the text just unlocks right before our eyes. It's not just a nice story, guys. It is a meticulously constructed structural masterpiece.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, take a look at your shiny new analytical toolkit. We've got causation and substantiation. We have instrumentation, preparation and realization, summarization, and finally, interrogation. Keeping these tools firmly in mind allows you to move way past surface-level words. You stop merely reading sentences and you start observing the true structural steel beams of any text you encounter.
I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. We saw how missing the single word for completely hid Jonah's true motive. If a single trigger word can change an entire story, what hidden textual architecture are you missing in your daily reading? Next time you open a book, an article, or an essay, don't just look at the paint. Look for the beams. Become a textual detective. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and hey, happy investigating!